Okay.
Okay, John of Lübeck is an extremely shadowy figure. For the present case study, it is enough to know that he wrote his prediction in Padua in April 1474, and that he dedicated it to Emperor Frederick III. This clearly structured and very original prediction, which is about 10 printed pages long, had been almost totally neglected by modern research until, one moment, until my own recent attempt to elucidate it. John's prediction is rooted in the tradition of Perso-Arabic conjunction astrology. Luis, can you all see the slide with this table right now?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, good. It is rooted in the tradition of Perso-Arabic conjunction astrology as shaped and adapted to the Christian faith by the pseudo-Ovid de Vetula, by Roger Bacon and by Pierre Deilly. In other words, it is rooted in that Western revised version of the theory, which no longer envisaged an unlimited number of possible religions, but a series of 6 world religions, of which only the last was still to come. The cyclical concept of history that was typical of the Perso-Arabic theory had been replaced by a linear concept that was compatible with the Christian faith and with the Christian view of world history and eschatology. The originality of John's text lies partly in the fact that he managed to overcome a huge problem, namely that the next 6 conjunctions of Saturn and Jupiter would all be inconspicuous according to the central criteria of the conjunction theory, because they would not entail a shift of triplicity. John's solution to this problem was to interpret one of them, namely that of the year 1504, in a sophisticated and rationally appealing astrological argumentation based on tenets of revered authorities as signifying the advent of Antichrist, who was at that time by many identified with the Messiah of the Jews. The authorities John mentions explicitly are 7, with an emphasis on texts on historical astrology by pseudo-Ovid de Vetula, Antonio da Montolmo, Abu Mashar, and Masha Allah. John thus managed successfully to draw on the widespread contemporary belief that the end of the world was near and to provide an answer to the central open question, namely when exactly the eschatological opponent of Christ would come into the world. While there had been astrological predictions of the coming of Antichrist before John's, and others would be made after his lifetime, John's prediction is unique insofar as it painstakingly avoids the traditional prophetic elements of earlier, purely religious predictions of Antichrist. Instead, John focuses on a distinctly technical discussion. Another aspect of his originality lies in the manner how he employs the tenets of historical astrology. Half a millennium before his own time, the abbot Azzo of Montier-en-Der had assembled all relevant passages from the Bible and the Church Fathers' writings into a chronologically arranged biography of Antichrist that could easily be memorized and was indeed common knowledge at John's time. All details of this biography are either parallels or contrasts regarding the life of Jesus. Hence, the name Antichrist. The only biographical detail that John's contemporaries did not already know or believed to know, was arguably the most intriguing one, namely when Antichrist would be born. Hence, John could have focused exclusively on the prediction of this date. What he does instead looks superfluous at first sight, but serves a clever purpose. For the first time ever, and based on the chart of the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter in 1504, he provides systematic astrological explanations of most of the canonical, well-known details of the biography of Antichrist, thus bolstering the credibility of his one and only prediction of a still unknown detail, namely that of the date when Antichrist would be born. Others had predicted that date before him by means of prophecy or astrology, or a mix of both. And most of them had already been proven wrong by history because the predicted time had long passed and Antichrist had not come. Therefore, we may presume that late medieval readers were both curious and cautious regarding new predictions. John's strong emphasis on a thorough technical discussion of the eschatological event in question appears to have impressed more than a few of his contemporaries, as is clear from the wide reception of his text. And I think this happened not surprisingly. An expert who was able to explain the other long known details of Antichrist's biography so convincingly from a single chart was probably right in his calculation of the still unknown date and time of Antichrist's birth based on the same chart and on a method taught by no less an authority than Abu Mashar. Let us then take a closer look at John's astrological argumentation. This is John's chart of the conjunction of 1504. As usual at that time, it was computed with the Alphonsine tables. What his contemporaries were unaware of is that John not only rectified the astronomical data, but also manipulated some of them. In particular, Venus and Mars were on the date in question not in Cancer, but in Leo and Taurus. These manipulations were not easy to detect because in 1474, when John wrote his prediction, printed ephemerides did not exist yet, with the consequence that one needed an initial suspicion as well as the competence to compute astronomical data from the Alphonsine tables in order to detect the incorrectness of these data, without which John's astrological argumentation would collapse. As a matter of fact, we have evidence of only one reader who noticed the two wrong planetary longitudes, but that was 20 years after the text's publication, and that reader, a Dutch astronomer, thought they were computational mistakes, a view that I strongly disagree with for reasons that will soon become available in a separate English article. Therefore, I shall not discuss John's manipulations here and accept the given chart just as his contemporaries did. On my handout, you find the relevant passages in the same chronological order of Antichrist's biography as presented in John's text. John tackles the following 11 questions related to Antichrist's biography. Why Antichrist's mother will be of Jewish ancestry, why the conception will take place entirely in secret, why Antichrist's mother will be of noble lineage, why she will be lewd, when Antichrist will be born, so that is the central question. Then why he will be born in Babylon, why he will be eloquent, why he will be powerful, why he will be rich, why he will perpetrate his deeds quickly, and eventually when he will be destroyed by God and the world will end. Most of these questions begin with why, thus calling for an explanation. Only questions 5 and 11 begin with when, thus calling for a hitherto unknown date. However, it was agreed that the date inquired by question 11 would be 33.5 years after the date inquired by question 5, because Antichrist's life was expected to last and be structured like that of Jesus Christ, namely 30 years until his first appearance in public, and then 3.5 years until his death. Since I am a master at running out of time, I shall start with question 5, namely when Antichrist will be born, and then examine the other questions in chronological order as far as we get. That will suffice to demonstrate John's technique. Text 5 reads, in my translation, from the hour of the conjunction of the superior planets to the appearance of the said lunar prophet, it will be 2 years, 95 days, and 17 hours. Therefore, the time of his birth will be during the year 1506, on the 13th day of September, 17 hours after noon. It will surely be then, as demonstrated by the stars, that the son of the demon will be born. End of quote. Since John counts the hours in compliance with late medieval astronomical practice from noon, not as we do from midnight, the date he gives is, in modern expression, 14 September 1506 at 5 a.m. John makes his prediction of the time span between the conjunction itself and the event signified by it without methodological explanation. As to be expected, he is following Abu Mashar. John had mentioned this authority 3 times in earlier passages of his text, and all 3 passages refer to on conjunctions. It is paragraph 139 of that work which is relevant here. Here you see the relevant quotation from K.G. Yamamoto's and Charles Burnett's precious edition of Abu Mashar's work, namely from their English translation of the Arabic original, with some interspersed clarifications of mine in italics. My contribution to the conference proceedings will, of course, quote also the Latin text, which renders the Arabic passage faithfully and was John's direct source. Abu Mashar says, quote, as for how to know the time at which they, that is, prophets, appear, it is discovered from the ascendant of the conjunction and the position of the conjunction indicating their coming out. If, case A, the ascendant is one of the houses of the superior planets, or the exaltation of Jupiter and the house of the moon, and Saturn is in a cardine by number or by equation, the prorogation is from the ascendant of the conjunction to the position of the conjunction, giving to each sign 1 year. If, however, case B, the ascendant is not one of those we have described, the prorogation is from the position of the conjunction to the ascendant of the conjunction, that is, in the opposite direction compared to case A, giving in this case to each sign 1 year, except if the sign of the conjunction is bicorporeal, etc., etc. End of quote. Since the ascendant of our chart is Virgo, case B applies. And since the conjunction takes place in Cancer, the final exception regarding bicorporeal signs does not apply. Hence, the application of Abu Mashar's rule runs as follows. The time span in question, henceforth x, results from the zodiacal distance between the conjunction at 1942 Cancer and the ascendant at 2734 Virgo, which amounts to 67 degrees and 52 minutes. Now, Abu Mashar wants one full sign, that is 30 degrees of arc, to be equated with one full year. This count leads to 2 full signs and a remainder of 7 degrees 52 minutes, whose relation to one full zodiacal sign is the same as that of the time span x to one full year. Hence, x equals 472 divided by 1800 multiplied with 365. And this is 95.7111, equaling 95 days, 17 hours and 4 minutes. John's calculation complies, as we see, with the authoritative instruction by Abu Mashar and is mathematically correct. In the next step, we must add the time span x to the previously established exact date and time of the conjunction, namely 10 June 1504, 11:54 and 48 seconds before noon. This leads to 14 September 1506 at 4:58:48 a.m., as correctly stated by John of Lübeck, who rounded the result to full hours by saying 5. He rounded it to full hours and expressed it with the usual noon epoch of the previous day. Let us now turn back to question 1 and proceed in chronological order. Since Mary, the mother of Jesus, is of course Jewish, and since the whole biography of Antichrist is systematically based on parallels and contrasts with the life of Jesus, Antichrist must equally be born by a Jewish woman. John says, quote, having seen and recognized the arrival of the Messiah of the Jews and, astrologically speaking, a lunar prophet, we must examine the nation and social condition of her who will conceive him and give birth to him. In this conjunction, the cusp of the 10th house, which house signifies mothers, is a term of Saturn, in which Mercury stands, the lord of the ascending sign, namely Virgo, and also lord of the 10th house, namely Gemini, who is placed there. So Mercury himself is placed in that house, in the 10th, in his own house. And the lot of the mother falls in the 13th degree of Leo, another term of Saturn. And since Saturn signifies the Jews, it is to be concluded that this person conceiving and giving birth to Antichrist will belong to the Jewish nation. By the way, he always speaks of person who will conceive and give birth to Antichrist instead of using the word mother, mater in Latin, because he wishes to keep that mother of Antichrist completely detached from the Virgin Mary, who is the mother par excellence. It seems useful to highlight and number the 4 central arguments on which John's reasoning is based. All 4 of them seem to be derived from the writings of Abu Mashar. I shall review them one by one. Firstly, while the chart's 10th house is usually associated with career and social rank, John's association of this house with mothers is justified by Abu Mashar's great introduction, Book 6, chapter 26, paragraph 14, which reads, quote, "The 10th place is called that of authority, and it indicates high rank, kingship, authority, the ruler, the judge, nobility, renown, fame, skills, actions, and mothers." John's next step is to focus on this house's cusp. In other words, on its most important single degree, and to examine the planetary term to which this cusp belongs. It is a term of Saturn, whose religious signification, namely Judaism, is emphasized at the end, argument 4. In Saturn's planetary term, John finds not only the cusp of the 10th house, but also Mercury, who happens to be lord of the two most important cardinal houses of this chart, and is therefore strong. Although John mentions the ascendant too in this context, I assume that he is focusing especially on Mercury's lordship over the 10th house, the midheaven, namely that house which signifies mothers, as he just asserted. The fact that Mercury rules this house and is located not only in it, but right in the aforementioned term of Saturn, where the cusp falls, appears to strengthen the religious signification of the planetary term of the cusp of the House of Mothers. This interpretation is supported by the observation that John does not mention the second celestial body located in that term, namely the Sun, presumably because the Sun is not lord of the 10th house, nor does it hold any other planetary dignity in this chart. Now to John's third argument, the lot of mother. That lot is addressed by Abu Mashar in his great introduction, where he explains both how it is calculated and why it belongs to the 10th place. Quote, "The 12th is the lot of the mother. It is taken by day from Venus to the moon, and by night the opposite, and it is cast out from the ascendant. This lot indicates the conditions of mothers. We have put the lot of the mother in the 10th sign because the 10th sign indicates the conditions of mothers, because it is opposite the place of the fathers." End of quote. The formula given by Abu Mashar for the lot of mother is identical with that given already by Firmicus Maternus. In mathematical notation, it can be expressed as you see on my slide. In the present case, this formula leads to a series of equations which result in the fact that the lot of mother will be at 13 degrees 4 minutes of Leo. So once more, we find John's text confirmed. His computation is correct. Our fourth and last point, the association of Saturn with Judaism, is central to conjunction astrology, as shown earlier. Abu Mashar's key sentence reads, quote, "If it," that is Jupiter, is mixed with Saturn, Jupiter being the general signifier of religion. So if Jupiter is mixed with Saturn, it indicates that the faith of the people of that religion is Judaism, which is similar to the essence of Saturn." End of quote. To sum up this point regarding question 1, John has adduced 4 arguments, all based on his conjunction chart and in line with Abu Mashar's teaching. Taken together, these 4 arguments are likely to have been accepted by contemporary readers, as a convincing astrological explanation of the canonical Jewish origin of the mother of Antichrist. We now come to John's second question, namely why Antichrist's conception will take place entirely in secret. This biographical detail is based on a parallel in the life of Jesus, where only Mary is present at the angel's annunciation, which was also called Conceptio Christi, conception of Christ, in the Latin tradition. John's astrological explanation reads, "This conception and impregnation will take place entirely in secret, because Mercury, the lord of the ascendant of the conjunction, that is of Virgo, and of the 10th house, Leo, is hidden in his own house, under the rays of the sun." I just saw that there is a wrong symbol, at least in my script. Mercury is in Gemini, the cusp falls in Gemini. So he is, as John correctly says, hidden under the rays of the sun. One moment. Sorry, I forgot to move on with my slides. So please correct the symbol of Leo in the last line of my translation to Gemini. John is here referring to the well-known concept that when a planet is under the rays of the sun, as the astrologers used to say, that is within a maximum elongation of 15 degrees from the glaring luminary and thus invisible, then the actions signified by that planet will take place in secret or go unnoticed. In the present horoscope, Mercury at 28 degrees 37 minutes Gemini is the only planet within that distance from the sun, located at 28 degrees and 22 minutes Gemini. So the distance is actually tiny, only 15 minutes of arc. Moreover, Mercury seems particularly suitable for this kind of argument because John had, in text 1, emphasized Mercury's strong signification regarding Antichrist's mother, and motherhood is closely related to conception by that same mother. Let us move on to text 3 on why Antichrist's mother will be of noble lineage. The parallel from the life of Jesus is obvious because Jesus is, not biologically, but legally speaking, son of Joseph, a descendant of the house of King David. John's astrological explanation reads, quote, "This woman getting pregnant will be of eminent lineage in her community of faith because of Jupiter, the lord of the 7th house, that is of Pisces, who stands in the cardine of the 10th house in his own exaltation, Cancer." End of quote. This is easily intelligible. Within the 10th house, whose relevance for Antichrist's mother had been emphasized in text 1, we find Jupiter at 19 degrees 42 Cancer, Jupiter being the symbol of kingship. Hence, the mother will be of noble lineage, all the more so because Jupiter is particularly strong in this chart, because the 10th house happens to be his zodiacal exaltation, Cancer, and also because Jupiter is lord of one cardinal house, namely the 7th, Pisces. I tend to think that in the present argumentation, the 7th house is not of interest in its own right, as signifying women and marriage, but only insofar as its zodiacal rulership strengthens Jupiter. However, Jupiter happens to be ruler of another house too, namely of the 4th, Sagittarius. Therefore, one may conjecture that the Latin text originally read, quartae et septimae, that is of the 4th and 7th houses, presumably written in Roman numerals in John's original, and we know that he wrote numbers in his original in Roman numerals. This conjecture gains some plausibility from the fact that John's extant text is clearly incomplete in 4 other instances due to scribal omissions of single words or parts of words. So the point cannot be ascertained with certainty, but if my conjecture is correct, John's argument becomes even stronger. Next comes text 4 on the alleged lewdness of Antichrist's mother, in sharp contrast with the purity and chastity of the Virgin Mary. According to various popular works of the 13th century, the mother of Antichrist would even be a prostitute. John's explanation of her lewdness is twofold, dealing first with Venus and then with the moon. The first part reads, quote, "Furthermore, she will be lewd because Venus, the ruler of the 9th house," the 9th house's cusp is in Taurus, and Venus by day, as is here the case, being ruler of the triplicity of the ascendant and the exaltation and triplicity of the 7th house, is in conjunction with the 3 upper planets within half of her orb. End of quote. This is a lot of data, but the various data regarding Venus, as mentioned by John, are all correct. And one may presume that they all deserve attention, even if John does not explicitly say so, because they emphasize the strength of Venus in the present chart. Moreover, since Venus is located in the 10th house, which signifies Antichrist's mother, Venus's astrological qualities, especially fondness of sexual pleasures, are projected on the mother of Antichrist. Based on the same kind of argument, text 3 had projected an astrological quality of Jupiter, namely kingship, on the same woman. John's reference to the canonical astrological orb of Venus at the end is correct too. Her orb measures 14 degrees, that is canonical astrological doctrine, 14 degrees being twice 7 degrees, so 1/2 of the orb on either side of Venus. Since Venus is located at 13 degrees 52 minutes Cancer, Jupiter and Saturn at 19 degrees 42 Cancer, as well as Mars at 18 degrees 22 minutes Cancer, are within Venus's orb, and therefore in conjunction with her, not only loosely by full zodiacal signs, but strictly speaking. Hence, John's argument seems to be this. The historical conjunction of the superior planets, especially Jupiter and Saturn, in 1504, will lead to the conception of Antichrist in the aforementioned Jewish woman, since Venus will be in close conjunction with the superior planets within the 10th house, which signifies mothers. Venus's typical qualities, in particular fondness of sexual pleasures, will be reflected in the mother of the prophet who is indicated by the conjunct planets, namely Antichrist. John continues, arguing that, quote, "The moon, the ruler of the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter, in the cusp of the 9th house, in her own exaltation, illuminates the rising sign, Virgo, with a trigonal ray and receives Saturn and Jupiter, aspecting them from sextile within her orb in her own house. Here, John expects his readers to know that the moon's sign, Taurus, is one of the 4 signs classified as lecherous, both in the ancient Greco-Roman tradition and by Abu Mashar. The moon is, in the present chart, particularly strong and therefore particularly capable of causing lecherousness or lewdness for a variety of reasons. John has stated earlier that the moon is al-Mutats, the ruler of the entire conjunction chart. The moon is also located in its exaltation, Taurus. Its position coincides almost exactly with the cusp of the 9th house, which signifies religion and is thus particularly relevant to the eschatological figure of Antichrist. The moon is also in an almost perfect trine aspect with the most important cardinal point, the ascendant being 27 degree 34 Virgo. And the moon entertains a similarly favorable, well-defined sextile aspect with Saturn and Jupiter, who are in conjunction in the moon's zodiacal house, Cancer. More precisely, the moon casts an exact sextile aspect on 29 degree 22 minutes Cancer. The angular distance between that point and the conjunction at 19 degree 42 Cancer is only 9 degree 40 minutes, and this is less than 1/2, namely 12 degrees, of the canonical orb of the moon, being 24 degrees. One last and important topic I wish to present to you is question 6. Why he will be born in Babylon. This belief is attested in many medieval sources. John's astrological explanation reads, quote, "And he will be born in southern parts of the world because of the conjunction place in the house of midheaven, in a land that lies to the east and is subjected to Cancer, because the moon rules there in Cancer. And I believe that it will be in the area of Iraq, in which lies the land of Babylonia," end of quote. John is here following Abu Mashar, who says about the new prophets that, quote, "Their coming out is from cities belonging to the sign in which the conjunction occurs," end of quote. John's reference to Iraq is probably based on a spurious appendix to Abu Mashar's treatise. It reads, quote, "Cancer, the countries belonging to it are the land of Babylon," and the Latin translation, which John was following, reads Terra Babyloniae, Ifriqiya, Libya, which is in the land of the Byzantine Empire, Francia, Al-Arbaya, and Wadis. End of quote. Moreover, one finds John's association of Cancer with Eradia, that is Iraq, in the Latin translation of Abraham ibn Ezra's work on conjunction astrology. So this all makes sense, but before we turn away from text 6, let us return to the previous slide with Abu Mashar's paragraph 139. Right after my quotation, that paragraph continues, quote, "Their activities," and this is about the prophets, of course, Their activities are in cities belonging to the signs quartile to the ascendant of the conjunction. The days of their periods in their rule are according to the small years of the lord of the sign dominating the city in which their activities appear. End of quote. It seems impossible that John did not take notice of these two sentences, and they both must have caused serious problems to his purpose. The first sentence is about the signs quartile to the ascendant, and since our chart's ascendant is Virgo, the quartile signs are Gemini and Sagittarius. Hence, Antichrist's activities must be in cities ruled either by Gemini or by Sagittarius. But the medieval biography of Antichrist takes it for granted that he will first appear in public in Jerusalem and terrorize the world from there. Jerusalem belongs to Palestine, more precisely to Judea, which is ruled by Aries according to Ptolemy's astrological geography and also according to the aforementioned spurious appendix to Abu Mashar's treatise, which John followed for the association of Babylonia with Cancer. We must therefore assume that John found Jerusalem to be ruled by Aries, and since Aries is neither Gemini nor Sagittarius, it is no surprise that John passes in silence over the city in which Antichrist will be active. Abu Mashar's second sentence entails a bigger problem. It instructs the reader to calculate the time span of the prophet's rule by converting the small years of the lord of the sign dominating the city in which their activities appear into days. Now, the Christian tradition unanimously states that Antichrist will rule 42 months, equaling 1,260 days, equaling 3.5 years. The astrological small years of the planets, however, vary between far smaller numbers, regardless of which planetary ruler of which geographical area we take. Not even the greatest numbers would have provided any satisfactory match for John's purpose. Oh, I apologize for the fact that the planetary symbols got wrong here, but my point is clear. All small years are far smaller than the required 1,260 days required by the Christian tradition. Not surprisingly, John prefers to pass in silence over the fact that the Christian eschatology is here incompatible with astrology. Instead, he refers exclusively to the Christian tradition in his last text, number 11, where he announces that the church, and with it Antichrist and the entire world, will end in the year 1540. This year results from the addition of 30 and 3.5 years to Antichrist's birth date, in compliance with the periods of the life of Jesus, who started appearing in public at about age 30. I shall now skip the remaining texts and summarize instead what we learn, in my view, from all 11 texts on our handout. John of Lübeck manages to provide a whole series of astrologically plausible, partly striking explanations of given biographical data regarding the life of Antichrist. His explanations are firmly rooted in the tradition of historical astrology, especially in the writings of Abu Mashar. It is the same source that he follows in his determination of the only still unknown detail, namely the date of Antichrist's birth. One may wonder why he did not explain his mathematically correct application of Abu Mashar's respective tenet. Instead of speculating about this, however, I prefer to emphasize one certain insight that we gained, namely that when John passes in silence over an explanation or a discussion we might have expected, it is impossible to know a priori whether our own analysis will bring to light an impeccable astrological procedure, as was the case with John's calculation of Antichrist's birth date, or an astrological problem, problem that the author preferred to cover up, maybe even a manipulation of astronomical data. In order to be able intelligently to discuss the technical details of this and similar authors' horoscope interpretations, it is of paramount importance to have reliable critical editions of the respected authoritative manuals. Much progress has been made in this respect in recent decades, especially through the editions of Abu Mashar's two major works by Charles Burnett and Keiji Yamamoto, but other important works are still lacking critical editions, such as Antonio da Montolmo's much acclaimed De Revolutionibus Annorum Mundi, on the revolutions of the years. And this text was quoted, as I mentioned earlier, by John of Lübeck, for instance. It is to be hoped that the present conference's attention to technical detail will not only inspire more analyses of practical applications, which are important and much needed, but also new editions of astrological manuals. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Stephan. I don't know if you heard the clapping. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
I can hear you. Well, I am very delighted that there was clapping, but I only saw it to be,
Okay.
to be honest.
No problem. Okay, so I'm going to ask if there are a few questions, and then no questions. Oh, one, yes, Charles. I don't know if you can hear them, but if you can't, I'll.
Hello, Charles.
Can you hear me clearly now?
Yes, I can hear you.
No, I think that was a very, very convincing account of how John Lübeck made his calculations, and I'm very pleased to see that Abu Mashar's on the Great Conjunctions was his main source, and that he occasionally disregarded the source when it didn't actually tie in with the traditional Christian view of when Antichrist would, which city he would rule in and how long he would rule. Do I get the impression that he is at the same time checking other astrological sources and confirming Abu Mashar with other sources, or when Abu Mashar doesn't agree with what he thinks or give the information that he wants, does he then look at other astrological sources?
That's an important question, of course. There is no case where he explicitly compares Abu Mashar to another source, but the simple fact that he draws explicitly on this or that other author's manual in some passages of his work may indicate, in my view, that he either did not find a relevant tenet at all in Abu Mashar, or not a tenet that was suitable to his purpose. At least, for instance, when he when he checks the work of Antonio da Montolmo or the anonymous treatise, under the name of Alcabitius on the conjunctions of the planets, that demonstrates, in my view, that he did take into account more than one authority, but there is no case where he refers for one and the same problem explicitly both to Abu Mashar and an alternative source.
Okay, I don't think there are.
Please let me add one point. He does say in the earlier part of his text that Abu Mashar wanted the horoscope of the vernal equinox to be analyzed, but that he will comply with the Western medieval tradition of focusing instead on the chart of the conjunction itself. So in that case, he compares, I would say, one practice with a later one, the original practice with the Western medieval practice, and prefers the alternative to Abu Mashar. But in that respect, that is not an individual peculiarity, as you all know, but all these authors of John of Lübeck's time focus on the chart of the conjunction instead of that of the vernal equinox.
Okay, thank you, Stephan, for being able to join us. I'm sorry for the delay, but the internet was acting up. So thank you very much.
Thank you all.